Hello, I'm Karen Martin. Welcome to today's ACC Open Forum program on Taking Care of Business. It's produced in conjunction with Mirus Australia. Now, there's been recent changes to the aged care sector that have presented new challenges to providers. More than ever, your organisation will need to stay competitive and financially sustainable to provide quality care now and in the future. But do you and your team have what is needed to succeed? Well, to find out, I'm delighted to introduce you to our two guest panellists who join me in the studio today. James Price is the Managing Director and co-founder of Mirus Australia, or co-founder, of Mirus Australia, a company that assists aged care providers to succeed with their operational goals and achieve financially sustainable long-term success. Hi, James.
Hi, Karen. Hi, Kevin.
James has over 15 years' experience in business operations and performance consulting and extensive experience assisting aged care providers to improve their overall financial position. Over the past 6 years, James and the team have collaborated with more than 200 aged care providers, helping them to establish robust and sustainable revenue management capabilities. Thanks, James, for joining us today. And also joining us is Kevin Rocks. Kevin is the CEO of Holy Family Services, a community-based aged care retirement village in New South Wales. Hi, Kevin, how are you?
Well, thanks, Karen. James, pleasure to be here.
Great. Kevin has overseen the successful growth and development of several aged care and hospital projects in a career that spans over 35 years. I didn't think you were that old, Kevin. Kevin and his team have also worked with Mirus, and Kevin shares his experience with us today. So now it's over to you. Our lines will be open throughout the whole entire program, so give us a call to join in the conversation, make a comment or tell us how you're remaining sustainable in this challenging time financially. We'd love to hear from you. The number to call is 1800 658 499. Now, James, we know that there's been some significant changes to the industry recently. Can you talk us through some of these and the main challenges that you see providers are facing?
Oh, absolutely, Karen. Over the past 6 years or so, we've seen some varied changes and we've seen some providers adapt. The key change of note was in 2008 when the industry moved to a new funding model. Yes. We moved from the Resident Classification Scale, or RCS, to ACFI. And that was an interesting change because all of a sudden providers were paid not for what they did for residents, but for the usual care needs of those residents and how that translates through to funding. And not only was that a change in a fundamental shift, it was also then compounded by further changes all through the last 6 years, be it rate changes, rule changes and some of the movements of the caps. And I think what that's meant for many providers is that some have adapted very well and others are still meeting that challenge. And it's brought some disparity in terms of performance across the industry, where we see a number of providers who perform extremely well and we see others that are sometimes struggling. And I think what's key to those that are doing well is strong investment in revenue management, recognising that's going to be a key reason for success.
Great, thank you. And I mean, those changes have really been significant, but that's certainly a great deal of change for anyone to deal with. And you mentioned disparity in financial performance. Are there any key areas that organisations, in your opinion, can focus on to be more sustainable now?
Yes, there are, and we're going to focus on those today. And key to the future success, the ongoing sustainability, is a revenue management function. Many organisations have parts of that. They may call it different things, but in an environment where we recognise good clinical skills and we support the careers of carers in that space, we're seeing an emergence of a requirement for people with good, strong business and financial skills. And we need to start recognising that as a discipline and really supporting staff in the education and the available tools to do well there. And revenue management is not just about checking the numbers. We see it really requires a holistic approach, and we'll hear today how that focuses around people, process, technology with the support of an organisation.
Sure. And so what about if people neglect the financial stream and take their eye off the ball there? What happens?
Look, it does inject a fair amount of stress, not only for the staff themselves who are trying to be compensated for the care that's provided, but also for the stakeholders and the management around how sustainable can our business be for the future.
That's right. And so now we'll continue with today. Now we're going to hear from Andy Hoggan. Andy is a principal consultant at Mirus Australia who specialises in the people aspect of change management. And he's going to talk us through the people and organisation aspects of the business. Hi, Andy, over to you.
Hi, Karen. Thank you. I guess, as James mentioned, there are 4 elements to looking after the business, so to speak. He mentioned things like process, or systems and technology, and also these other 2 areas which we call organisation and people. Now, I recognise that a lot of the facilities that I work with, I see that these financial responsibilities are often given in to people who also have a lot of other responsibilities around delivering care. Things like roles like care managers and facility managers and so on. And I also understand that it's really quite complex to try and balance all of those high priority care issues, but also try and make sure that business is taken care of. And one of the ways I think is quite helpful to overcome that is to look at it in a real holistic fashion. So it is looking across these 4 different areas. We'll talk about the other 2 areas a bit later, but I'd like to talk about the more people side of things. And having a psychology background, this is often really my go-to, is to think about the more softer side or the people side of how to actually manage revenue. If I use, say, the aged care funding instrument as an example, and I'll use that because it's a tool that's been around for a while, and also because it's one of those systems that actually involves quite a lot of staff. It actually involves a lot of staff to actually make it happen. So you can actually have, say, strong processes in place to manage ACFI. You can tell people that they've got to do step A, B, C and D in order to maybe get a claim from start to finish. And you might also have all the great technology in place as well. So things like, I've seen the adoption of things like tablets across facilities where staff are walking around and entering in care data and documentation data straight into technology. But yet, even though you can have all of those things in place, I hear a lot from leaders in different facilities that something like ACFI is still not working well. And when we take a deep dive and try and understand why that is, often what I see is actually more the people side of things that's actually missing. What do I mean by people side of things? Well, at the organisation level, this is things like the culture of the facility. So if you don't have the right messages going out from the leaders around that not only is care important, but also that the financial side of things are really important as well. And down at the individual level, this is the things like the individual skills and role clarity for people. So they may understand that they've got to deliver care, but maybe there's a bit of confusion as to what their role is when it comes to managing revenue or things like ACFI. So how do we address this? So I guess one of the really important things at the organisation level is, as leaders, are we sending the right messages to our staff? Are we telling them that they have a really important role to play when it comes to things like the aged care funding instrument and revenue? And second to that is, are we providing them with the right skills and knowledge to actually undertake their role? This is one of the things I see as one of the biggest barriers to staff being engaged, is that when they're unsure about what they actually need to do, they go to is just not to do anything at all. So these are the areas that we typically look at when we think about people and organisation and the link to revenue.
Thanks, Andy, for those comments and for joining us too. Now, Kevin, you've seen how effective this approach can be in practice with your team at Holy Family Services. Can you talk us through some of the things you've done around revenue management?
Well, I'd like to sort of move it away, just slightly away from the ACFI, because ACFI is but one component of it. When we looked at Mirus and engaged Mirus, what we were doing was a number of things. We wanted to benchmark and by an outside agency how well we were doing. Now, we knew with the Stuart Brown and Company's benchmarking that we were very competitive both in income and expenditure. But that didn't mean to say we weren't maximising the revenue stream. Now, the revenue stream, ACFI is 70% of that, so it's terribly important. But more importantly, what I was looking for was not a consultant that sort of borrow your watch to tell you the time, but we wanted somebody who could work as a peer with us and support us and eventually work to improve our culture. Now, this has a number of aspects, just very quickly. One, I wanted the Executive Director of Care, who'd done an excellent job, not to feel threatened that we're bringing somebody else to have a look at it, but to realise that she now had a peer support system there available.
That's fantastic.
Terribly important. Also, we wanted ongoing education so that staff could grasp what this whole mysterious ACFI thing really was all about, and how important their work, particularly the documentation and that, was in this whole process. And in doing that education, we're actually validating people's work. And can I say, the more we can validate the carers' role, who are at the front line looking after our residents, the better. And you know, I think that's a very important component in all this. But it certainly was a culture change.
Yes.
Just not a revenue issue.
No, and James, what are your thoughts about that? Because it was wonderful that you were engaged, but then how do you continue the work with them?
Well, it's a good point. I mean, Kevin talked a little bit about benchmarking, and that's a really understanding of how well are we doing. And reference to an external source is extremely important, but it's not the be-all and the end-all. And if we look back over the course of ACFI, when we first started talking to providers, they'd say, well, we're struggling with ACFI, we need to get the right level of funding. And now what we're really seeing is that providers are saying, I need a sustainable process because it takes up so much of my time, and we really need to keep a handle on it so that we don't waste our valuable resources.
Fantastic.
Can I
So-
just sort of make it,
Absolutely.
sorry, to make just
Go
a point
ahead.
on this too. What came out of the Mirus review was that we were very strong in our claiming and documentation, and there was some doubt as to whether actually much would be gained. But certainly quite a considerable gain was made in revenue. And then we moved on to being, in terms of benchmarking with the Mirus family, and there's over 200 facilities where I've, in our two rack numbers, 1 or 2, in claiming. But that came from a strong foundation before Mirus. So I think you can be doing well, but you can always do better. And in an ongoing way, you don't look at Mirus to come in, wave a magic wand, and everything improves. No, it's a lot of hard work, and you need to be doing that hard work as a peer and work with them. And I think that message is very important.
Yes, and of course, Kevin, Andy talked specifically around organisation and people. So what initiatives have you done at Holy Family Services there to address this, the actual people in your organisation?
Well, we've certainly looked at the education of staff in an ongoing way. Also, it's very good when you've got the Executive Director of Care in charge of the ACFI claiming and staff being educated, so that when requests come for additional staff on the floor and that, there's an educated response to that call for more staff, because one goes with the other. As your ACFI claiming goes up, it's reflecting the increased needs of your residents, therefore you need increased staffing. And I would sort of refer back to the name of this session. It's just not about money, it's also about good quality care.
Yes,
and that is something that can't be, so it's not revenue just, but you need the money to do the good stuff.
That is so true. Now, James mentioned at the beginning that the other areas of revenue management were both systems and technology. So let's hear now from Mirus Director Simon Wilson about these two areas.
Hi Karen, thanks a lot. I'd like to maybe just talk to you a little bit today around processes and what we see when we work with clients at the moment. What we often find is care-related processes are very well documented. If I give a couple of examples, if a resident has a fall or there's a fire at a facility, everyone knows exactly what to do. It's a well-rehearsed drill, and it's very easy to make sure that we get everything happening as expected. When we look at a lot of financial related processes, they're quite often not as well documented, and they're certainly not quite as robust as those sort of examples I gave. If we take an example of a client we worked with very recently, we looked at their admissions process, and the scenario we saw at the beginning was when a resident came into the facility, they spoke to the receptionist on the front and was just asked to have a tour around the facility, something that happens fairly commonly across a lot of facilities. They were directed to the first available person and given a quick tour around the facility and didn't leave their contact details. So very difficult for the admissions officer to follow up with that person. We spent a bit of time working with this particular facility and actually had a bit more of a structured approach to the process. We made sure that they were directed to the person that specialises in admissions. They took the time to understand what was really important to this resident and their family. Around culture, language, and also a little bit around their financial means. The tour that was then provided to this resident and family was then very personalised. They only showed the rooms that were relevant and affordable for this resident, and they took time to actually highlight all the things they knew would be really important to this resident as they moved into the facility. On the back of that particular change, we saw a significant increase in their occupancy levels, and certainly something that's going to lead ultimately to much better financial sustainability and also happier residents in the facility because it's a much better match for their care needs.
And Simon, with the recent changes in accommodation pricing, what changes have you seen in terms of process among aged care providers now?
We've seen some significant changes from the beginning of July. With all the changes in accommodation pricing, what it's forcing providers to do is be a lot more customer focused. The market is a lot more competitive now, and people have to take this structured approach to how they manage their admissions. I'll give you an example. A facility that's not filling its beds very quickly, and if they've got a very structured admissions process, they can very quickly identify, is our marketing not appropriate? Are we not attracting the right sort of residents and referrals? Do we have a big variation depending on who runs the tours or who handles the admission? Are we finding that the people that are coming to the facility do not have a clear understanding of what's involved and the mechanics of moving into the facility? All of these different things have a very different plan of attack that the facility would take to drive corrective actions. So it's really important to be able to measure in that process what's working and what's not working and be able to make the changes when you need to.
So tell us, Simon, in your view, how important is technology to the success of today's aged care provider?
Technology is at a bit of a crossroads in aged care at the moment. I think the industry typically is underinvested in technology, and what we're seeing now is people are having a much greater focus on measuring outcomes as well as efficiency. We often say with the right technology, what gets measured gets managed, and that is really, really true for the aged care sector as we stand today. What we're seeing is the big change is the number of and types of tools that have been adopted and used in aged care. A lot of focus is on collaboration. Processes are getting more complex. They're getting spread across multiple facilities, geographically dispersed, and actually the technology now is a crucial enabler to make sure that the right people are doing the right things at the right times. It's a big change, but it is making life a lot easier for people working in aged care now.
And Simon, what sort of technology does Mirus offer to help people manage their operations now?
Mirus has developed a technology called Mirus Metrics. What a lot of organisations don't necessarily appreciate is 70% of the revenue for a facility comes from government subsidy, and that's mainly your ACT fee. It's very complex. There's 64 different pay points per resident, and it's always changing. So being able to efficiently and effectively manage that revenue stream is crucial. Mirus Metrics is designed to make that a lot easier for the clinical and care staff. We provide information which is fairly complex in a very easy to interpret format and make sure it's very obvious for the staff to know which things they need to focus on and what they need to prioritise, saving people time and making it a much more of a focused effort in managing revenue.
Well, Simon, thanks so much for those comments. Now, Kevin, I know you've benefited from Mirus technologies. How have they improved the way that you and your team operate?
Well, I can just give you one example. The Mirus Metrics, which can be used either on iPads or any of those things. The Executive Director of Care has one on her phone, so that anytime, where she's doing an ACT fee review and that, all she has to do is just put the app on and away you go. And it's a very complex assessment tool which is dead easy to use. It's really just bang, bang, and it just covers everything, goes to all the different areas, and it's so thorough in its claiming capacity. And as I said, if it's that good and it gets increased revenue, it's also giving us extra funds for staff and other things.
Yeah, and I guess too, as you say, if the technology is easy to use, people will feel confident to use it. And if you've provided it, and training's available, James, to use that, because you obviously train the people to use that metrics, the technologies.
Look, absolutely. As part of our ongoing service in supporting providers with their revenue management function, technology is a vital component. And we've taken a very comprehensive approach, and one of the first things we did is we designed a free app, and that helps people just understand the various funding levels that are available under ACFI and make them feel more comfortable with technology in a really easy to use way. And that's really helped drop some of the barriers to adoption when we're showing our Mirus metric system to providers. And that technology is at various levels. It reports at the executive, it looks at the facility manager's KPIs, and it also looks at a resident level. And one of the things that's really key there is different people will have different appetites to using technology, and they'll have different things that they want to get from technology. And so we recognise that not everyone's a technology whiz kid, and we need to make it nice and easy for people to feel comfortable and progressively give them more functionality as we go through. And as part of that ongoing revenue management piece, somebody might be really happy to work with the technology and somebody else might be really happy to help bolster the process. So matching those skills in a provider facility is a good idea.
Can I just make a sort of another
Go
point
ahead.
on this, that the actual app and that is great and it helps and it simplifies things, but nothing will take the place of the hard work of staff doing the ACFI work. It's ongoing, so there's no magic wand. And anybody who's looking at Mirus, I think, has got to sort of accept that it doesn't advantage anybody really to have a one-off, just go in and, increase your revenue. It's a steady, it's almost like the turtle in the hare, or the tortoise in the hare. It's just day in and day out doing that hard work. But it's a lot easier when you have got a peer who is supporting you with not subjective eyes but fresh objective eyes on what you are doing, and you can't replace that.
That's for sure. Look, people watching this may obviously be very focused on care. They may be saying, well, what's all this stuff about? Why have I got to have my head and two hats? Why have I got to wear these two hats? Why can't I just deliver the care I want to deliver? Kevin, you probably got an answer for your staff because you've probably heard that a number of times.
Yes, it's. I remember once I was asked, what's the most important thing for a aged care facility to do? And this was at a board meeting, and the suggestions were your mission, your good patient, your resident care, and all that. And I just wrote on the whiteboard to stay in business and make a profit, because that is the first responsibility. The rest of it, doesn't happen. But if you have that education and change the culture, that staff actually understand ACFI and what it's about, it gives good resident care, because it funds good resident care. Very important. It also has funding for other things, like we've furnished all our common areas. We've painted outside. We've established a men's only occupational therapy area, which we've bought an old Morris 1000. We've, so the men can sort of play with that. We've got a full billiard set up for them. It's these things don't just happen.
No.
And it's very important that we see any revenue stream, maximising it, as just trying to get the best outcomes you can for your residents. Terribly important. And I'll just go back to that cultural change. Everyone has got to understand what it is happening, and making a profit and getting as much subsidy as you can in order to make the residents' life the best they can be. I don't apologise for that.
Well,
Never
some
would.
of those projects sound fantastic.
Yeah. And look, what I'd like to add to that is when we first spoke to Kevin, we looked at the benchmark numbers, and we sometimes wonder whether you are comparing apples with apples. And Kevin's group was doing extremely well, very highly funded. But then you ask yourself the question in terms of, well, compared to what? And when we started to look at the residents within the facility and the processes that were in place, we saw opportunity for some small improvement. And a small improvement, as Kevin talks about, flows down to the bottom line. And I think what's really progressive is the way that the organisation has invested in the staff by saying, well, I appreciate it wasn't just a project, it needs to be an ongoing process, and that process doesn't help on its own. And when we talk about 70% of revenue tied up in one instrument, that can be quite daunting for people.
Sure.
So to have some support and commitment from the organisation is one of the real keys for success.
And even a small percentage increase in the revenue stream is a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And we certainly found that out.
Yeah. It makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference, yeah.
Well, let's go now to Bay Valenzuela. She is the Executive Care Manager at Tulloch Families Community in New South Wales. Welcome to the program, Bay.
Thank you very much.
Now, Bay, what's your experience working with the Mirus team and how have things changed for you there?
Okay, hi guys.
Hi, Bay.
So we've been with the Mirus team for the last 2 years, and when we first started, we looked at our ACFI base and the benchmark as well. We've worked with them over the 2 years, and I have to say, I think we've got the model of service that is right for us,
yes,
especially at Tulloch Family Community,
yeah,
and it works quite well hand in hand with the Mirus service as well. The gentleman that talked about changing the culture, I do agree that it's accountability and changing the culture of everybody,
yes,
not just the care manager, not just the RN. It has to be from the floor up as well, and that will certainly take time.
So, Bay, people would be sitting here thinking, well, you know, I'm here to deliver the care. You know, this is all about executive cares managers. They should be looking after this, financial managers, etc. You say you're engaging all your team from the bottom up. How do you talk to them? What's the language you use to engage them?
Well, I don't focus it on as increasing the revenue. I focus on meeting them on a regular basis and saying, look, you are doing the care. Let's get the funding for the care that you do so that we will be able to, as the gentleman said, give back to the residents, whether it be extra staff, whether it be extra furniture, extra activities. You ask the nurse how many, they're so busy during the day, they would always like extra nurse and extra resources. You can't get resources if you don't put in the effort in terms of ACFI.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Bay, very much for joining us on the program today. And we do appreciate that you've been able to help explain how we can engage all staff, and particularly, you know, to keep it alive and to keep them being able to deliver the good quality care that they're there to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Bye now.
Bye.
So, James, how should a facility, or how do a facility know they're going well or not so well? And who or what do you compare to?
Look, great question. And a facility will often have a feeling as to how well they're travelling, but it's an extremely important idea to go out and seek external points of reference. Mm-hmm. If you're part of a large group where there are multiple facilities, you can quite easily benchmark performance because you understand all the components. And you can get a guide from the well-known benchmarking reports that are available in the market. But the only downside to those is you don't know the composition of the facilities. But it's probably an approach that you need to incorporate several different elements. So there's looking at your own facilities. There might be looking at some external benchmark reports. You might be looking at your local community, so other providers that you trust and you work well with, and talking to them. And don't forget, we've got the association and, of course, our friends at the Aged Care Channel who can connect as a network to help people get a better understanding.
So, Kevin, you were saying before that you thought you were doing very well and you'd been benchmarked and you'd use other schemes to know, you know, where you were sitting and how you positioned your company. So what's changed now?
Well, we've got an increased revenue stream, but can I sort of make the point too that whilst ACFI and that provides 70% of your income, from my point of view, I've got to look at a cash flow position on a monthly basis for the whole organisation. So that's the first thing that I know, whether the business side of the aged care facility is doing well. Then you start looking at the revenue streams of where it is. So then we look at the ACFI stream. Now, I was confident we were doing well. As I said, the Stuart Brown benchmarking showed us. But as James said, trying to get apples with apples and without knowing who is in that particular benchmarking group can be daunting, particularly when you're dealing with a lot of ageing in place. So there's a lot of review of various residents under the ACFI scheme. And that's, sorry, James.
I was just going to add to that around benchmarking. It's a bit of a double-edged sword in that if you're at the high end of the benchmark scale, you're happy. But if you're at the low end of the benchmark scale, you can be less happy. And one of the things to really understand there is it's about being funded based on the level of care provided. So if you're a subacute facility focusing on end-of-life care, you are going to have a very high funding. But if you're much lower care but with high bed licences, well, your funding will look different, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It's about understanding that if revenue stays flat, then costs would stay flat. But if costs start rising and revenue doesn't rise, then we're missing a trick. And that's really important. And Simon talked to it earlier about you need to measure something in order to be able to manage it effectively.
Absolutely. And so do you have that conversation with the staff when you're training them?
Well, look, we do, because sometimes it can be very confronting when you see a report that says you're not doing so well. But then it's really a case of understanding, well, where should we be? What are the barriers to getting there? And it's often we don't have the resources to do something. We often don't have the reports and the technology to help us understand that. And so sometimes we're a little bit sort of hamstrung. So that's really what providers like ourselves are good at doing, is giving people the kit bag to go and do everything that they can.
And so there must be people out there thinking, but, you know, what happens if we overclaim? Kevin?
Well, we're not talking about overclaiming. Far, far from it. And that's why it's terribly important, the education and the documentation which backs what you are claiming for and the level you're claiming for. Now, in 11 years at Holy Family, the Executive Director of Care has driven the ACFI claiming. We haven't lost funding on any of the validation visits. So I think that speaks for itself. And I certainly wouldn't be a party to anyone who was trying to rort the system, because that's ultimately going to catch up with you, and it's going to result in other problems further down the line. Really what we're talking about is claiming quite clearly for what the residents require so that we can deliver that level of care, and it's as simple as that. And if there is, and I'd also point out that in an ongoing way, Mirus works with the Director of Care in reviewing the various ACFI packs. Sometimes in this review you're prompting to, well, maybe it's time to re-look at that resident and what their needs are, and that does, you know, occur, and it does mean the residents' care needs are reviewed and are carried out. So that again is a good resident, outcome. You can't just look at this from a point of view of money and claiming, and we wouldn't. And Mirus certainly has never been any way other than what it is what it is, and that's where we're at.
And we've seen a lot of bad press in the industry over the years around providers who may push the envelope a little bit too far, and we support all of our clients with validation, should they be validated. And the feedback that we get when somebody has a knockback is usually to do with paperwork.
Yes.
And if you think about the amount of paperwork that needs to be done, and often people who complete the paperwork might not fully understand the intricacies of ACFI. English may not be their first language, they might struggle with some of the meanings, yes. And also sometimes you see conflicting information on files, because what better way is there to keep a history than put it in the same file? So those elements sometimes make the challenge of validation a little bit tougher. But in years, we haven't seen any examples of downgrades due to people who are fiddling the system. Mm-hmm. It's really just haven't managed to get the paperwork spot on.
Great,
and I think that's a very important point too with a lot of the staff. English is not their first language, and the meanings of words, what they think it means, may not mean what the validator thinks it means, and this is where Mirus is very good at too. They'll pick up on, well, this needs to be sort of looked at and changed, and this is how we go about it. You don't say this because it doesn't mean that.
Well, let's go now to Sue Stevenson, because Sue, she's the Executive Care Manager at Cowinda Aged Care Facility in Coonabarabran in New South Wales. Hi Sue, how are you?
Hi Karen, I'm well. It's Coonabarabran.
Yes, of course it is. Of course it is. Now, Sue, as the manager of a smaller rural facility, you were initially reluctant to hire external consultants, I thought, or I've been told. So tell us about your experiences and how you came to work with Mirus in that collaborative style.
Yes, Karen, that's exactly right. Cowinda, we had 2 external consultants in 2009 and 2011. And these consultants were costly in time, as consultants are, and money, and gave incorrect and inconsistent information, which led to downgrades.
Really?
So, yeah. So we discussed with the key staff, and we decided to do our own ACFI reviews, education, because we also had people going to education, and that was inconsistent.
Yes, yes.
So we discussed this at regional meetings and found other facilities had the same experience. So we decided that we'd get ACFI coordinators for each section, and we'd try and manage the ACFI within our organisation and educate staff in-house and use Medicare for queries, and we were happy with this process. But in July 2013, Mirus were offering a free funding analysis with
Yes.
data from Mirus metrics benchmarking.
Yep.
And with Coimbra to the broader industry. And Coimbra's average daily subsidy, unfortunately, was well below.
Well, were you surprised about that?
Well, we actually, because we're very remote. We weren't actually benchmarking.
Yes.
We were just trying to get our claims in and do it well, look after our residents, and yes, we just didn't have the resources to do what we were needing to do for the future.
Well, fantastic. And so what things have changed since you've, been working with Mirus, and since you've been able to have the collaborative style of approach to managing your finances and, in fact, that finance revenue stream?
Well, all I can say is wow.
Wow.
It has been fantastic. As the care manager, as I said, we don't have a lot of resources within our small facility. Our ACFI process has become more streamlined.
Yes.
Our staff are more engaged and enthusiastic. So documentation supports the claim. We've had 3 validations since being with Mirus, and no downgrades.
Fantastic.
So and the validators, also internally, we've improved our assessment approach.
Yes, of course.
Which goes into our care plans. Our ACFI coordinators actually do the assessments, and that goes into the care plans, so we make sure they're actually what the usual care needs are. And all the ACFI validators have been very, very impressed with our documentation, which reflects that's what you need to do. And the other things, the residents' cares have improved as staff are more conscious of a resident's diagnosis and gather information to assist with accurate assessments of usual care needs. In other words, we call it good nursing practice.
That is fantastic.
And all this supports the accreditation process, staff satisfaction, of course, and quality outcomes for residents. And, of course, it's not just about the money.
No, of course not.
We have monthly meetings with Mirus as well with our ACFI team, and they're always very interactive, and we always, when we finish the meeting, they've supported us. We continually have to maintain our level of income because our average daily subsidy has increased so much. And we've had low occupancy in the last 6 months.
Yes.
And we wouldn't have been sustainable if it wasn't for our upgrades with our ACFI.
No, well, look, that's a fantastic story, because the thing that you're saying is that, yes, you can't be sure that your beds are going to be full, and yet you've got, a little bucket of money there that you can draw on when times are not
That's
so
right. And
good for you.
Mirus also offers training, and we do twice a year. And that is so engaging, and the staff all the staff, it just flows around the facility how good it is, and now they understand the dollar value, and and so it's engaged the staff more, and hence the resident cares are better because our assessments are better, and so it's all a flow through, and it's all looking forward to. And I can't recommend Mirus enough in the way they are professional. And they're always there. We can ring them at any time if we've got a question.
Yes.
And they're very engaging. They check out, if we want a claim checked before we submit it, they will do that and send us back any recommendations. And it's just, it's a great relationship for Coimbra and Mirus. And we look forward to the future.
Great.
And I'm very happy to share my story with anyone who wants to talk to me. That's how good it is.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue, and thank you so much for joining us on today's program and talking us through that, because you give it real life, just as Kevin does too.
Yep.
Thank you, Sue, and hello to everyone there, and goodbye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So, James...
Sorry, I'm just sort of fascinated that what I was trying to articulate, our experiences with Mirus, has been... the 2 phone-ins have been exactly the same. In fact, the language is often the same. And it all revolves around not just money, but changing the culture and
Yes.
better outcomes for residents. And also the peer support is good, it's friendly and professional. And I couldn't speak highly enough of Mirus either. And to hear others say it is the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Absolutely.
And you've got 3 providers with nothing to sort of gain, but tell the truth of their experiences. And
But I think it comes down to, aren't we talking about collaborating with experts? I mean, you know, when I was working and I had wound care to consider for a resident and I didn't feel that I had enough knowledge or expertise to manage that wound, I would bring in a clinical care consultant in wound care, the specialist at the time and the expert. So that's
It's
what
more
you're talking
important to
about.
know
your
what you don't know,
collaboration.
isn't it?
Absolutely. You're talking about that collaborative approach, knowing that you don't know or you could be in fact improving if you brought in an expert in the subject. And of course, that's what they're doing, James, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, a lot of the time we're providing that steady hand to keep a process that needs to be constantly looked at and re-engaged, and then giving access to expertise, generating enthusiasm around what can often be quite a dry subject, and just supporting in a partnership capacity with our clients. And we love the work, and the team get up in the morning smiling and really excited about engaging with the clients because they can make a difference to so many people.
That's right. So, James, how can a provider properly assess the key aspects of their business to ensure it can thrive in a more competitive environment now?
There's a number of ways. There's, I think, always seeking out somebody that you trust, or if you don't have somebody who can give you that opinion, talking to people that might be able to refer you. There's always Mirus, of course. We're quite happy to talk to all clients, but I think where we come from is people need to trust you to get the most out of you, and most providers I see are extremely collaborative, and they will share the good, the bad and the ugly about who to speak to for advice.
Yeah, and I think that is important, and I love the way that that Sue was able to say that they're very rural. You know, they don't have all at their fingertips people in their teams. They don't have large teams like larger organisations too to just draw on these people. So seeking out the collaborative approach is a better way to go. And look, she's absolutely maximised.
And you know what's also key there is it's not about us going out and doing things to a client.
No.
It's about giving people the tools and the skills to stand on their own 2 feet and run with that process. And it's recognising that revenue management is a strong business discipline, and with the support of management will help the organisation thrive.
Absolutely. So, James, is there anything burning now that you'd like to add to this program now and tell the viewers?
No, look, I mean, it's great to be able to come and share our experiences and impart some of our knowledge and our experience. One of the things that we are really passionate about is the measurement of activity on an ongoing basis. We don't like to put things on the shelf and come back a few weeks later. We like to constantly be revisiting, and we've always said that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. It does sound a bit cliche, but it does ring true. And so just a constant focus on these things is what matters.
And of course, all the quality people out there would be absolutely saying, absolutely, you've got to measure it to manage it. Yeah. And Kevin, what about you? What would your last and parting words be to somebody watching this who may be a bit sceptical, thinking, what's this program all about, really?
Yeah. Well, all I'll say is you need to go in for the long haul with it. You need to look at changing your culture, and you don't just change your culture in a month. You need to work at it and work at it and work at it. And also, I think it's important for the whole staff to realise, well, our management style at the executive is to put the best people we can in jobs, and our main role then is to support them in their roles to get the outcomes that we're seeking. And in this, just another aspect of how we do it. We looked at the issue of revenue through ACFI, and we thought, well, what we need is peer support for the Executive Director of Care, and we need education for all our staff, particularly those on the floor. And that enables them to do their job better, so the resident outcomes are better. And also importantly, as I said before, staff at that level are validated for the work and role they play in aged care. And long may it be so.
And on that note, I think that's so true, and thank you, Kevin, for that. And thank you, James, too, for all your great advice today. Thank you both of you for joining us on such a great program. And a big thanks too to all our callers and our special guest Andy and Simon, and all of you who have joined us to watch the Open Forum today. Now, if you'd like to know more about any of the resources or services we've talked about today, you can contact the Mirus Australia team by visiting their website at mirusaustralia.com or by getting in touch by phone or email. Consultants like Andy and Simon are available to help take better care of your business and ensure that your team both survives and thrives financially and into the future. So the Australian Aged Care Quality Agency is hosting a series of better practice events again this year. They're exciting conferences, as you may know, and if you haven't been along to one, get along to one soon. You can look at aacqa.gov.au at their website to see when it is available in your state and how to register. And remember to switch on to ACC for more inspiring discussions coming up. We hope you can join us for the next Forum in Our Management series on the 27th of September. We look forward to your company. Until then, from me, Karen Martin, and all of us here at ACC, take care as you take the lead, and we'll see you next time.